I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation for Monday, June 22nd, 2015. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. I'd also like to note for the record that the directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. By the way, I am Steve Cohen. I am chairing my first meeting as the chair of this august group. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, we welcome public comment on the items on our agenda. After each item is presented and comments are received from the directors, we will allow members of the public to provide comments. To ensure maximum opportunity for participation, speakers representing themselves may speak up to 2 minutes, and those representing groups may speak up to 4 minutes, one speaker per group. All comments should address only the item that is under consideration. Now, before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We will then be sure that you may recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Anyone? Well, in that case, I would like to disclose that I own a residence and reside at 360 Furman Street, which is 1 Brooklyn Bridge Park. That building is adjacent to the site that is the subject of the agenda item regarding the proposed draft modification to the project's general project plan. Therefore, I will recuse myself from the vote on that agenda item. I will now ask that Richard Dorado, who is here, present the first agenda item, appointing Joseph Chan as president. Richard, when you're ready, please begin.
Thank you, Chairman. It's requested that the board appoint Joseph Chan as president of the corporation, effective as of June 22nd, 2015. In July 2013, the directors appointed Mr. Chan vice president of the corporation. Mr. Chan is currently executive vice president of real estate and public and private partnerships for Empire State Development. Prior to joining ESD, Mr. Chan served as president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, a senior advisor to New York Deputy Mayor for Economic Development and Rebuilding, director of real estate and business services for the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and director of economic development for the Local Development Corporation of East New York. He taught public school in the South Bronx as part of the Teach America program. Joe currently chairs the board of directors of a student enrichment program, Horizons, at Brooklyn Friends School, and serves on the board of Horizons National. He was recipient of Crane's New York Business 40 Under 40 Award and a distinguished alumni award for NYU Wagner School of Public Service. He lives in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. The board is requested to appoint Mr. Chan to the office of president of the corporation and confirm that he is an officer of the corporation in accordance with the UDC Act and for purposes of the bylaws, including the indemnification provisions thereof. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the directors? Any questions from the public? Sir? Yeah, go ahead.
Presumably you want identification.
I would love it.
Mannheim, I have a question. You want me somewhere else? Fine. Behind this podium, is that the idea? My name is Anthony Mannheim. I've been involved in the development of the Brooklyn Bridge Park since 1983. It's a question on a comment that I have, and it's really whether the board considered or why it was deemed appropriate to have a name as president, someone with a development background rather than with a parks background, a real estate development. I thought we were building a park, not a real estate development.
I appreciate the question, which we will take as a comment, and thank you for your remarks. Yes. Yeah, if you just state your name.
Lucy Coteen. Yeah, I had I just wanted to make a remark in respect to Mr. Chan being appointed as the president of the BBPDC, if that's correct. I was going to ask you not to rubber stamp that appointment because in 2013, Controller Lou's audit found many areas of poor financial management when Mr. Chan was president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. So I request that the committee look into those reports and issue a statement relating to their findings. They should not assume that he would provide sound stewardship to the BBPDC due to the questions that were raised by the controller's audit in 2013.
There are no further comments. I will entertain a motion for approval. Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Congratulations, Mr. Chen.
Thank you.
The next agenda item, Richard, involves the appointment of Elizabeth Fine as General Counsel.
Thank you, Chairman. The Office of General Counsel for the Corporation is currently vacant. As an ESD subsidiary, the corporation derives its powers and authority from ESD and is governed by ESD's enabling statute and other laws and regulations applicable to ESD. In order to ensure continuity of advice regarding statutory compliance and uniform policy in the exercise of the powers and exemptions afforded by ESD's enabling legislation, and to efficiently utilize staff, ESD's General Counsel is appointed General Counsel to its subsidiaries. At their February 20, 2014 meeting, the ESD directors appointed Elizabeth R. Fine as ESD's Executive Vice President Legal and General Counsel. It is proposed that Ms. Fine be appointed General Counsel of the corporation. Ms. Fine served as General Counsel to the New York City Council from 2006 through 2014. She served as Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the United States Department of Justice and as a counsel to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the White House, and Georgetown University Law Center. It is also recommended that the corporation authorize the automatic ex officio appointment as the corporation's general counsel of the person appointed by the ESD directors as the ESD general counsel. Provided, however, the board shall be notified that the ESD directors have appointed such person as general counsel, and provided further that the board may remove such person from that position. This ensures that the position will not be unnecessarily vacant. The directors are requested to appoint Elizabeth R. Fine as the corporation's general counsel ex officio and as an officer of the corporation pursuant to the UDC Act and the provisions of the corporation's bylaws, including the indemnification provisions thereof. Directors are also asked to authorize the automatic ex officio appointment as corporation counsel of the person appointed by the ESD directors as general counsel and to confirm such person as an officer of the corporation within the meaning of the UDC Act and the provisions of the corporation's bylaws, including the indemnification provisions thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions or comments from the directors? Hearing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for approval. Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Ms. Fine. Our next order of business is approval of the minutes of the directors' meeting of July 15th, 2013. Any questions or comments regarding those minutes? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? They are accepted. Richard, if you'll continue with the next item, requesting authorizations for the corporation to adopt a draft modification to the proposed general project plan and to hold a public hearing.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, the board will be requested to consider the adoption of a draft proposed modification for the purpose of beginning the public process for holding a public hearing and soliciting and collecting public comment to be considered by this board and the ESD directors in taking further action with regard to the proposed modification. Specifically, the board is requested to adopt and recommend to the ESD directors the adoption of the proposed draft modification to the project's general project plan for the purpose of holding a public hearing and soliciting and collecting public comment on the proposed draft modification. 2, to authorize the hearing with respect to the proposed draft modification. And 3, to authorize all actions related to the foregoing. The project's general project plan, or GPP, delegates to Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation, or BBP, a not-for-profit corporation established by the City of New York, such delegation subject to the general project plan of all obligations and responsibilities with respect to the construction, operation, maintenance, and funding of the park and the adjacent development parcels. BBP has requested that the corporation and ESD consider a GPP modification regarding the development parcel located on the uplands of Pier 6. This board is requested to adopt the proposed draft modification for the purposes of holding a public hearing and soliciting and collecting public comment, and to recommend to the ESD directors that ESD adopts the proposed draft modification for the purposes of holding a public hearing and soliciting and collecting public comment on the proposed draft modification. If the board determines to so adopt it, and soliciting draft modification. Comments on the proposed draft modification have been reviewed and considered by the corporation and ESD. This board has considered such public testimony and comment in a public meeting and taken appropriate action and recommended to the ESD directors appropriate action regarding the proposed modification. And 5, the directors have reviewed and the ESD directors have reviewed and considered such public testimony and comment and the recommendations of this board, and the ESD directors have, in a public meeting, taken appropriate action regarding the modification. Such appropriate action could be withdrawal, affirmation with changes, or affirmation as adopted of the modification. The proposed draft modification concerns the Pier 6 Uplands development parcel. The modification would, 1, retain the current GPP authorization for 2 buildings of up to 315 feet and 155 feet respectively, but instead of prescribing the number of units in each building, retain the maximum aggregate of units for both buildings at 430, and allow the BBP board to determine within those limits the number and affordability of residential units and other characteristics of the building, consistent with the technical memorandum dated November 18, 2014, prepared by ESD as the lead agency in accordance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and 2, require that such building heights are inclusive of permanent structures and equipment such as mechanicals, bulkheads, and parapets, and measured from the flood-resistant construction elevation as defined in Section 6411 of the New York City Zoning Resolution, and 3, to amend the reference to the secondary loop road that currently exists in the uplands between Pier 5 and 6 to make clear that the existence of that road is discretionary with the BVP board. Thank you.
Richard, just so we're clear, because there was a lot of information packed in there, I gather this is the beginning of a process that then necessarily includes a formal opportunity for the public to make comment and submit views on this proposal. Is that right?
Yes, Chairman, that's correct. There'll be a notice published. There'll be 30 days in advance of the date of the meeting. There'll be the public meeting. Testimony will be on the record. There will be a stenographer at the meeting to take the testimony. In addition, written comments can be suggested at the meeting or after the meeting for 30 days following that meeting. And then those comments will be collected, reviewed, and considered before any further action is taken.
Thank you. And also, just for the sake of clarity, am I right that this draft proposal is what arises from the settlement of the Pier 6 litigation? In other words, a condition of that settlement was that this entity would consider this proposed modification language.
Yes, Chairman, that's the case.
Thank you. Does any of the other board members have, any directors have a question? Any comments? I understand that we have attendees, in fact, I think up to 25, who are with us today who wish to share their comments. At this time, we would like to invite those individuals as noted to speak. As noted in the beginning of the meeting, comments are to be limited to 2 minutes for individuals representing themselves and up to 4 minutes for those representing groups. One speaker per group, please. As I said, I believe we have 25 people who have indicated a desire to make comment. So while we respect your right to make those comments, to be succinct and to the point would be greatly appreciated, and to be respectful of the time limit also would be appreciated. I'd like also to state that this is not intended to be a question and answer session. It is, however, an opportunity for those, as we said, to make comments who wish to make comments. I'd like now to introduce Nicole Jordan. There she is, who will call upon the individuals who have signed up to make comments. Also, for those everywhere else but on that side of the room, you can see there's a clock that has the time that will count down. Ms. Jordan will help us with the clock as well. And at this point, I will turn to Ms. Jordan to begin the comment period.
The first speaker will be from the office of Senator Daniel Squadron.
Here.
It's from the office of Senator Daniel Squadron.
First of all, thank you, Chair Cohen and members of the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation Board for allowing me to speak on behalf of State Senator Daniel Squadron today. As many of you know, Senator Squadron has long opposed the luxury housing plan for Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Please give us your name.
I'm sorry?
Just your name.
Zishan Ott. As many of you know, Senator Squadron has long opposed the luxury housing plan for Brooklyn Bridge Park, a view that's shared by every local elected official representing the area, and various concerns have also been raised by both the City Comptroller and Public Advocate. The Senator has long contended that the luxury housing funding model perpetuates imbalances in park access and decision-making, and is inconsistent with the ethos of accessible open space, publicly owned and maintained for the benefit of the public. The Senator also believes that a new environmental impact statement, in addition to this 2014 technical memo, should be prepared because of the significant changes in the impact of the proposed Pier 6 development in the context of local school overcrowding, heightened storm risk, proposed mega development at Long Island College Hospital, and its exploding park use since the decade-old final EIS was released. We understand that today is not a time for specific input on underlying substantive issues, but the beginning of a process that is meant to allow public input and full consideration of modifications to the park plan. There has been some concern about the short notice for today's meeting. It's our understanding that today's meeting is procedural in nature and will likely be followed by an Empire State Development Board meeting, a public hearing with at least 30 days notice, and a month-long comment period, potentially followed by another public meeting of this body and a public meeting of the ESDC Board. Our office urges the state to schedule a hearing, which we understand will be in Brooklyn, in the evening to make it as accessible to community members as possible, and to avoid holding it in August when many community boards and local groups do not meet. As the Senator's appointee to the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation Board, it is also critical that I emphasize the Senator's view that this process must require the Brooklyn Bridge Park Board to consider all alternatives to the proposed development, exercise its own public due diligence, and maintain the promise that has long been made to the community that there will be a minimum amount of luxury development required to maintain the park's long-term fiscal health. Again, thank you, Chair Cohen and the board for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Zoltan Hanskowski.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Zoltan Hanskowski. I live in Brooklyn Heights, near the area of the proposed Pier 6 upland development. Although there are many factors why the 2005 FEIS and the 2014 technical memorandum are outdated and insufficient, and why a new environmental impact statement is called for, I will focus my comments on traffic issues in the adjacent area of the Pier 6. I live in the immediate area since 2009 and saw a huge increase in the traffic flow. The BQE has 4 entrance and exit ramps at Atlantic Avenue, Columbia Street, and traffic at rush hour is almost always at a standstill in this area, in both directions. Motorists attempt to avoid this traffic by using the adjacent narrow residential streets of Hicks, Furman, and Columbia, making traffic at the Atlantic Avenue BQ interchange a nightmare and dangerous for both pedestrians and vehicular traffic. To give you an example, The westbound traffic on Atlantic Avenue heading toward Pier 6 and the Port Authority Brooklyn Marine Terminal is 2 lanes. At Hicks Street and Atlantic Avenue, where, by the way, the Rich area is located, the Rich is currently located, which will be redeveloped into huge residential and commercial space, adding more traffic. Atlantic Avenue must accommodate left-hand turns from Hicks Street and the normal westward traffic flow, including 2 city bus lines, B61 and 63. One of these lanes at this point is reserved for the entrance ramp to the BQE. So you have 1 lane for all truck traffic attempting to go to the Port Authority Marine Terminal, the city buses, and all traffic heading for the southward BQ entrance, which must make left-hand turns at Columbia Street and in the direction of Red Hook. We also have motorists who, having decided to forego traveling in standstill traffic northbound on the BQE, cutting over to Furman Street to go northbound, and those motorists who are going to the park to pick up or drop off people. I understand I have no additional time, but I urge you to consider all of these factors among the other factors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Judy Francis. Judy, you can clarify your organization? I can't quite.
I'm the president of the Brooklyn Bridge Park Defense Fund. It's a coalition of 10 community associations, long-standing volunteer organizations representing about 100,000 people. Okay, I'm asking today to please authorize a new EIS before you vote to modify the GPP. There have been seismic changes to this project area that demands this. We no longer have a hospital in the area. That was unplanned and unstudied 10 years ago. The fastest trip to the next nearest hospital, in a race officiated by Mayor de Blasio when he was public advocate in 2013, clocked in at 19 minutes. 19 minutes. There's a magic hour that a person who has a heart attack, asthma attack, or a stroke will die. That has already happened with an urgent care. Where in the EIS does it say that an urgent care center is a sufficient replacement for a full-time hospital? The hospital that served 300,000 people, which is almost the entire population of Buffalo today, not to mention the tens of thousands of people who are coming even before these Pier 6 towers are built. There are 12,500 new apartments now in the Brooklyn pipeline that this park services, even before Atlantic Towers go up, not studied in the 2005 EIS. 1,000 additional apartments will go up 425 feet from this park, also unstudied 10 years ago. No new transit has been planned. In fact, in 2012, the city removed a bus line that served this area, the B77, among others. Next month, an RFP will be issued for the BQE reconstruction, according to the former councilman who served this area, and 2 engineering firms asked to bid. Where will the 182,000 cars per day be redirected? Where will they stage the construction materials for this rebuild? Almost every road in the area is technically at or over capacity. 78 parking spaces for the new Pier 6 buildings is inadequate. Where in the equation have you factored in the 2 garages within walking distance of Pier 6 also being developed for housing? Even though many of us contemplated these impacts and testified to their probability, our expertise and knowledge was ignored, even in the face of these tectonic changes. Not implementing an EIS now is a betrayal of the public trust, and we hold you all responsible for that. Our schools are overcrowded today. I'm sure you're going to hear other testimony. Accepting Litch, the skyscraper district that they're planning to build 425 feet from this park, and in return for 1 new school, doesn't even begin to meet the demands of the current residents who will live who live in this area and those who are going to live in that very development. Nothing for the park dwellers. If you are concerned with making sure this park is funded for 50 years, where is your plan to make sure there are enough parklands for all of these new people who are going to be moving in? Show us your 50-year plan for more parklands for all these new people. Isn't it worth actually planning parks now for the hordes that swamp this park today? Isn't the 3 acres that you could save at this park's grand entrance for Brooklynites worth the same attention you paid to financing it? New sewage plants have not been planned, yet when it rains, Dumbo basements fill up today. I don't know if you know what combined sewage overflow is, but there's been a term that the head of the EPA used that was coined by my husband. It's called a punami. I'll leave that to your imagination. What improvements have been made to the electrical grid? Just last week, a manhole cover on the corner of Clinton and Aiken Place blew up. There was a major explosion on my street, Pacific Street, this spring, and fires on Amity where they lost power for days. This was not studied 10 years ago in the EIS. I haven't even touched upon Sandy and your sea rise no plan. If this were simply a matter of rubber stamping the Bloomberg doctrine of alienating parklands with private housing, only a handful of we park advocates like myself would probably care. But this is about deceit. Building a park, saying that you need the funds, and when they were no longer needed, fabricating new expenses to continue this charade, and then grafting the issue of affordability to that story. This is a spectacular exercise in hubris, in deflection, in deception. We ask you to fulfill your mission, which is to build and to sustain a park. Go back to your masters at the city and the state and tell them no. Give us back those 3 acres, please, and abandon the folly of any more housing in this park because it is unwarranted and unnecessary. You can do this today. You can say, no, we want to stop this. We want to go back and do a new EIS because the 10-year time period that has passed is significant. And we need to plan for parklands. And I thought that's what this body was organized to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Henry Richmond, Director of People for Green Space Foundation.
Yes, sir. It's People for Green Space. 4 minutes. My name is Henry Richmond, the Director for People for Green Space. We're sympathetic to the need for affordable housing. However, this is a public park for everyone and about a fundamental commitment to minimize housing, minimize development in this park. First, the proposed modification is inconsistent with the MGPP, which established the parameters of the park structure and the UDCA standards for land use and improvement in civic projects. If the BBP can forego millions of dollars in revenue by including affordable housing in the Pier 6 development, the scope of the development can and should be reduced. The BBPDC has long committed to minimize park development. In her June 2006 affidavit in the BBP Defense Fund case, then-President Wendy Leventer specifically promised the court that, quote, as explicitly stated in the GPP, BBPDC has committed to building the minimum development necessary to cover the park's maintenance and operations needs. If once requests for proposals are issued for the development components, it becomes clear that market conditions will allow for less development to support the park's needs. The development program will be reduced accordingly. While a noble aim, the inclusion of unnecessary non-revenue generating affordable housing is inconsistent with the MGPP and the BBPDC's long-standing commitment to minimize development in this park. Look at the January 2006 MGPP, which is attached to the 2010 master ground lease with the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation. Page 12 of this document notes that the building envelopes described represent the maximum build-out within the project, with the intent being to build only what is necessary to support annual maintenance and operations. Further, the purpose and need of the project in the MGPP talks about the greater availability of publicly accessible recreational open space, remarkable views, and the inclusion of appropriate commercial uses to support annual maintenance and operations. Affordable housing does not generate funds to support the park and is therefore inconsistent with the MGPP. By taking away public space and by blocking the remarkable views when the public enters the park, the unnecessary affordable component is inconsistent with the MGPP for this park. Second, if the BBP can forego millions of dollars in revenue by including affordable housing in the Pier 6 development, this is a substantial change in circumstances and constitutes newly discovered information since the 2005 FEIS issued more than a decade ago, such that the park's finances must be reevaluated in a SEIS to determine the necessity for the development of Pier 6. The original analysis had a 2012 build date. Now project completion is expected in about 2019. Park real estate prices have increased from $750 a square foot in the 2005 FEIS to almost $2,000 a square foot. This is an incredible change in circumstances that warrants a supplemental EIS. Third, why was there no financial analysis and study of reduced density alternatives in the November technical memorandum? The authoring firm, AKRF, previously argued in court about the importance of this financial analysis in environmental reviews for this park. See affidavit of AKRF's Edward Applebaum in the 2006 Brooklyn Bridge Park Defense Fund case. Historically, financial analysis of the proposed project changes as well as alternatives have been included in environmental reviews for this park. For instance, see Appendix C of the 2005 FEIS or the January 2006 Corp findings. Current market data is important given the commitment to minimize development if market conditions permit it, as noted on page 16 of the January 2006 Corp findings. As the November technical memo does not include financial analysis, an SEIS is needed to show, first, the park is self-sustaining with the proposed changes, including foregoing millions of dollars in revenue by adding the affordable component, and two, whether current market conditions would permit the reduction in the Pier 6 development. On the latter point, as the affordable component, roughly 1/3 of the proposed development, does not generate revenue for the park, it is clear that the park development could be reduced by 1/3, thereby helping to mitigate the tremendous school outdoor crowding and other environmental issues created by the project. A supplemental EIS that includes park finances and reduced density alternatives is clearly warranted given the dramatic change in the park's finances and other circumstances. In conclusion, we urge the BBPDC to reject the proposed modification as it is inconsistent with the MGPP and to require a supplemental EIS as is warranted by the significant environmental impacts from both proposed changes as well as the changed circumstances since the 2005 FEIS. Thank you.
Stephen Huck.
My name is Steve Hauk, and I live in Brooklyn. Superstorm Sandy was an unprecedented environmental event that invalidated old assumptions like those underlying the FEIS issued 7 years earlier. But don't take my word for it. Governor Cuomo, to his credit, repeatedly has emphasized the game-changing impact of Sandy. Within weeks of Sandy, Governor Cuomo proclaimed in a Daily News op-ed, extreme weather is the new normal. And in October 2014, in a press release, he stated, Superstorm Sandy demonstrated that New York, as we know it, faces a different reality, the reality of increasingly frequent extreme weather events that cannot be ignored. And in January 2013, speaking about areas flooded by Sandy, like the site where these two enormous buildings would be erected, he told the Daily News editorial board, at one point you have to say, maybe Mother Nature doesn't want you here. Maybe she's trying to tell you something. As we all know, the governor is not only represented on the park board, but he's a man of considerable influence and prodigious persuasive powers. For example, just months ago, he vetoed plans to build 11,000 units of affordable housing in Sunnyside, Queens Railroad Yards. Surely, unique, beautiful parkland at the entrance to New York Harbor, and a mandatory flood evacuation zone is even more deserving of protection. Governor Cuomo, just don't talk the environmental talk, walk the walk. Do the right thing here. See to it that the FEIS is updated to reflect the many significant changes in the 10 years since it was issued, especially those you rightly have described as the new normal and a different reality, and require that any construction in the park be kept to the absolute minimum necessary to support the park's legitimate financial needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salvatore LaRosa.
My name is Salvatore LaRosa, and I'm an architect and a resident of Brooklyn Heights. I also serve on the Community Board 2's Land Use Committee. I'm speaking today as a resident of Brooklyn Heights and not in any official capacity as a member of the Community Board 2 Land Use Committee. However, by participating in numerous board meetings, I think that I can confidently say that our routine concerns are not being met by these plans. This is going to be amplified by many speakers here today about schools, FEMA, congestion, parking, and that's just a few of them. Considering that so much time has passed, which is going to be repeated and repeated, is also concerning. I urge the New York State Urban Development Corporation and the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation view these public hearings as essential to hear our community's concerns and take the necessary action to amend our plans. A new EIS is clearly warranted.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ray Judon.
I'm Ray Downey. I'm also a resident of Brooklyn Heights. And since my time is limited,
I just want to talk about the new environmental impact study, and why it's critical. Proposed changes and the dramatic changes in the physical conditions in the neighborhood areas since the 2005 FEIS require a new study. Increases in buildings in downtown Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, and the proposed rich development in Cobble Hill all lead to the need for increased services, police, fire, traffic control, schools, and a variety of items. The popularity of the park itself leads to a larger visitor population and therefore more required services. In addition to the expanded services we need, we must consider the effects of using a park which is in a flood zone and has a probability of other hurricanes like Sandy, and how that will impose on development requirements. All these factors need to be considered in evaluating the impact of what has been constructed and what is planned to be constructed in the park and neighboring areas. The previous EIS is 10 years old, and its basis, assumptions, and projections do not match the current conditions. Originally, the building was supposed to be completed in 2012. So when we have a situation with extreme addition of needs, change in conditions, how can the 10-year-old plan predict future needs and problems? I can't understand why anyone would object to performing a new EIS and obtaining data which is more consistent with the vast changes that have occurred over the last 10 years. In general, I think an EIS should carry an expiration date and a caution in it, best if used by. And that's why I feel that a new EIS should be done. Thank you.
Sandy Barbosa. Sandy, will you be speaking on behalf of AABA?
Yes, Atlantic Avenue Betterment Association. I get 4 minutes? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Sandy Barbosa, President, Atlantic Avenue Betterment Association. It is reasonable to call for a supplemental EIS now. It has been 10 years since the 2005 FEIS was approved, and would make sense to review the assumptions from a decade ago and study the real changes that have taken place since. In 2005, the park was not open and nobody lived in the park. Brooklyn Bridge Park is a regional park, not a local park. The park is already an amenity and attraction that draws significant numbers of users from the entire borough and Manhattan and tourists from around the world. A supplemental EIS would show that the number of park visitors is vastly greater than the number projected for the completed park in the 2005 FEIS. On the weekends, crowds are overwhelming Dumbo and Geralamo Street and the park itself. Yet there is still no agreement for protected parkland. That means more housing could be built later. And there is no gateway to the park from Atlantic Avenue, a major park entrance. Okay. The technical memorandum for the Pier 6 upland development describes how the proposed Pier 6 residential building would minimize potential flood plan impacts. However, there is no planning to protect the residents in the proposed buildings, park users, and residents in the study area. This calls for an SEIS. Tall buildings and reflective glass and light from buildings at night pose a serious threat to over 100 species of migratory birds. They are vulnerable to colliding with the structures, especially towers on the waterfront. This was not addressed in the technical memorandum. You have to protect the birds. The park financial plan has been challenged by an expert financial analysis. The CAC has called for an independent financial review. This could eliminate the unprecedented proposal to build private housing in a public park on Pier 6, which would restore the public space character of the park and create much-needed parkland. Roads and parking are already stressed. Local public schools are already overcrowded, and there is much more population growth and much more development outside the park than assumed in the 2005 FEIS. This alone calls for a supplemental EIS. There has been a substantial change in the project and conditions. The plan to build housing on Pier 6 should be stopped until we have honest answers. No development should be approved that underreports impacts on our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucy Coutinho. On behalf of CAC? Yes. You'll be the only speaker for that. Okay.
Hi, my name is Lucy Copteen. I currently have the honor of serving as the chair of the Brooklyn Bridge Park Community Advisory Council. In the past, some of us have taken part in ESDC hearings and have felt they were nothing more than dog and pony shows. Insightful comments by the community were routinely ignored. What assurance do we have that this hearing process is not just another example of the community's profound remarks being discounted, and that the conclusion is no different than the starting premise? These neighborhoods are exhausted by having large real estate developments shoved down their throats without due consideration of their effects, not only on the infrastructure, but on the psychological effects of going from a livable, sustainable community of low-rise buildings with walkable streets to being swamped by massive high-rises that have devoided the neighborhoods of air, light, space, and overwhelmed our infrastructures from sewers to school seats. How ironic that a mayor that has worked so hard to make pre-K available for all children, that we see an existing pre-K in a local school shut down due to lack of space. The BBP CAC has passed several resolutions requesting an SEIS for the BBP before proceeding with any new development. Circumstances have changed profoundly since the 2005 FEIS. The 2014 technical memo was seen as highly inadequate as it dismissed every major change and anticipated change that has occurred in the area as inconsequential. They made use of outdated information. It appeared to be a masquerade. How can you ignore the explosion of population without any upgrading in sewers, electrical grid, public transportation, roadways, and most obviously the lack of neighborhood school seats for the children who will be flooding into the neighborhood in the next few years? How can you cram an additional 20,000 people in a neighborhood and say there is no effect? The police precinct is overwhelmed with the demands placed on them with the unexpected high usage in the park along with the population explosion in the area. There is no longer a hospital in the area to serve the large population. How can the city ignore the effects of earth-wide environmental change that brought 14 feet of water washing up against one BBP during Hurricane Sandy, and the fact that our coast will be swamped with water in not that many years? Storms are predicted to get more frequent and more severe. You can put the mechanicals on a higher floor, but how will people enter the front door when sea level is up 6 feet? How much will sea level rise cost the city and state? In other words, the taxpayers. True urban planning would prohibit any new buildings in coastal flood areas. Where's the impact statement on the effect of children and seniors' health when they have so little open space to live and play in? The financial future needs of this park has been widely disputed with the 2006 agreement that there be no more development than is necessary to finance the park. Why isn't the corporation working with the community to uphold this meme? Why does the corporation not work to find a workaround to keep the upland of Pier 6 open for all the people in the city? With the injection of affordable housing into the mix, they have already agreed that less money is needed than originally accounted for. The affordable housing plan is inconsistent with the GPP. Let them work with the community and the state to fund the park. This is the tension that has been created between the community and the BBPC as they barrel over community efforts to create livable environments for their families. The park officials remain narrowly focused on creating more real estate rather than focusing on the consequences of doing so. They are out of step with the community that they ought to be serving. It is incomprehensible to this community that the ESDC would not take up a new SEIS or EIS before permitting any new construction in the parkland. A modified GPP that only looks at one narrow aspect of change is a massive injustice, not only to the people, but to a fragile environment. Thank you.
Steve Gutterman, Save the View Now.
Good afternoon. Chairman Coleman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stephen Gutterman, and I am the founder of Save the View Now. While Save the View Now is primarily concerned with the oversizing of the pier house and the results in the blockage of the promised views from the Brooklyn Promenade, today I'll be speaking about the proposed modifications to the general project plan for the park and the development of Pier 6. I'll be commenting on the environmental changes that have occurred over the past 10 years, the requirements to minimize the development in the park as stated in the general project plan, and a win-win alternative to the development of Pier 6. It would be irresponsible for this board to approve a quick modification to the MGPP and not fully analyze the current situation in a new EIS and alternatives. I'll be speaking of these ends. In 2005, no one anticipated Hurricane Sandy. Today, we must question why we are building in a Zone A flood zone. New York State government, under Governor Cuomo, is actively buying homes that are in floodplains and aggressively converting that land to non-residential use, such as parkland. The goal to minimize the financial burden to this state and to the homeowners when the next Sandy hits. It defies logic to convert parkland that's in a Zone A flood zone to residential and increase the financial exposure to the state from the next Sandy. The 2006 MGPP states, to maximum extent practical, site the proposed development so there is a maximum amount of park provided to the public at each entrance. A founding principle of the park, and there's some members of the board who were there for a long time know this, was to provide just enough income so that the park can be self-sustaining. At the last Brooklyn Bridge Park board meeting, David Lowen presented a graph showing financials. Even without Pier 6, the park will generate more than enough income to cover funds to pay for the unplanned higher costs for the piling repairs. It is short-sighted to allow a few years of negative cash flow to permanently remove much-needed open park space. The park could easily raise capital in the municipal bond market to cover that shortfall. I make this point to emphasize that even without a viable alternative, Pier 6 is not needed for the sustainability of the park. However, there is a viable alternative which I passed around. Some may remember in 2011, Mayor Bloomberg, Senator Squadron, Assemblywoman Millman agreed to include the Jehovah's Witnesses building on Columbia Heights in the pilot program for the park. This agreement expired in 2013 only because it was the end of Bloomberg's term. There is nothing in that plan that could not be implemented today and completely do away with the need to permanently convert park space to residential commercial use. It solves all the problems. It makes the park self-sustainable. It provides for affordable housing, does not take away any green space, and makes for an open and inviting entrance to Atlantic Avenue and Park. There is one loser. There's a developer who would develop Pier 6 who will no longer get to make hundreds of millions of dollars of profit. This alternative puts the public interest before anything else. I urge this board to exercise your obligation to the public as directors and to require a full review of the environmental issues for a new EIS and of alternatives before agreeing to this proposed GPP modification. Thank you.
Linda DeRosa Street. Linda, please clarify your organization name.
Yes, hi. I'm Linda DeRosa. I'm the president of the Willowtown Association. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. My comments are actually going to be brief, but in general, on the same vein with everyone else here. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember that you're not just creating a development here, you're creating really a small village, a new small village of homeowners and residents in a relatively isolated environment alongside established surrounding communities that are already struggling with beyond capacity schools, infrastructure, roadways that are clogged, overtaxed infrastructure, and in the big picture, lack of green space, which we care dramatically about. It's your responsibility not to rush to complete and develop this plan on old, outdated information from 2005. The world has changed dramatically since then. You've heard it time and again. It is your obligation to thoughtfully create a healthy, sustainable environment in Brooklyn Bridge Park that's going to be your legacy. So we look to you to really evaluate what you decide before you make any decisions, and ultimately decide for no housing or as little as possible on Pier 6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd Castello, Public School 8.
Hello, I'm Todd Castello. I'm a parent of a student at Public School 8, PS 8. I've been on the board, the PTA school board for the last 4 years. As a reminder, PS 8 is the public school that the kids from the Pier 6 development would attend if the project proceeds. In 2005, when the final environmental impact study was completed, it reported that PS 8 was at 66% capacity. Last spring, 15 months ago, the principal, along with the Department of Education, was forced to make the very difficult decision of abandoning the pre-K program, getting rid of it entirely, so as to avoid turning away other eligible students for kindergarten and above. At that time, this is again more than a year ago, the school was at 140% capacity, not 66% capacity. 2 months ago, in planning for next school year, 50 families in the PS 8 school zone were officially informed by the DOE that their children cannot attend PS 8 as kindergartners. Some of these people bought homes in the neighborhood for their kids to attend PS 8 and now being told, find another school. The problem is largely the result of residential overdevelopment and almost zero planning about the impact on local schools. Pier 6 would only exacerbate this problem and do nothing to alleviate it. According to the DOE's official numbers, Pier 6 alone, we had another 125 students in the local school. So the difference between the reported capacity of the local school, which the FEIS says is 66%, compared to the reality, which is 140% capacity, that alone, that issue by itself, never mind all the other things here, is reason enough by itself to require another environmental study. Thank you.
Anthony, having trouble with the last name. Can't see man, I can't see the last name.
Anthony Manheim.
Anthony, speaking on behalf of an association.
And the campaign for Brooklyn Bridge Park. But I doubt that I'll need more than 2 minutes. I'd like to begin by commending this body, the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation, for allowing comments by the public before they take action. That's not the procedure followed by the body that really conducts the development of the park. They vote first and then allow the public to speak. The net result may not be very different. In fact, however, I think this body, which apparently only meets once every 2 years, judging by the minutes action that was taken at the beginning of this meeting, would be further enhanced if when you vote to approve a president, when you call for a vote, when the chair calls for a vote, all those in favor say aye. It would be useful if he also called for all those opposed to say no. I doubt that it would change the net result, but it would maintain the illusion of public participation. Since this is not an opportunity to pose questions for answers to be delivered today, I'm going to make the bulk of my substantive comments a request that due consideration be given before action is taken to amend the general project plan to fully explain to the public why the change in the governing plan for the development of Brooklyn Bridge Park is not being subjected to the New York City ULIP procedures, but is being done in a manner of a modification to a state plan, which harkens back to an era when the state owned 2/3 or controlled 2/3 of the land there. This Brooklyn Bridge Park was swapped, along with Governor Island, between the city and the state for the Javits Convention Center. The mayor, not the governor, appoints the majority of the boards, including its chair of the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation, which chair, of course, is a development official, not a parks person, even though there is a New York City Parks Commissioner on the board. I really think that this is it's a subterfuge or a go-around of the intent of the ULIRP process that city-controlled properties should be subject to ULIRP, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedures of New York City, and not using a subterfuge of a state skirt to hide what's going on. Thank you.
Joan Goldberg. Joan, will you be speaking as an individual or will you use the 4 minutes to a
As an individual.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Joan Goldberg. I've lived on the cobblestone block of Joralemon Street since 1974. I bear witness daily and nightly to massive crowds and gridlock traffic on this narrow historic street that includes trucks, buses, and automobiles. The dramatic increase in use and the change in circumstances since the 2005 FEIS warrant the preparation of a new EIS. According to a 2014 visitor count by the BBPC, Park drew 119,000 visitors on an average summer day and 25,000 on summer weekdays. The number of average daily visitors to Brooklyn Bridge Park has steadily increased in recent years, each year exceeding the year prior. The visitor counts are significant since less than half of the planned park space has been completed. The daily visitor count does not include the additional visitors who attend special events and programming. These 2004 figures clearly show that the projected number of park users was grossly underestimated, and therefore all assessments of open space impacts were inadequate. A new EIS is essential.
Jonathan Holman. Jonathan, will you be speaking individual or on behalf of PEDS?
No. The park is 85 acres, of which 10 is still waters. There's already 55 acres of commercial space on the drawing boards. That's the square footage of what you have at the various development sites and commercial, about 2.3, 2.4 million square feet. I have a homework assignment for you guys. Relax, it's gonna be a tough sell, I can see. Very tough, but I think it can be done. I'd like everyone here, and if you haven't done it, you really should, take a walk through the park twice. Once on weekends, start either coming down Atlantic, go across, come out Fulton, or the other way around, and once during rush hour. The first thing I'd like you to do is stop and look at the vista, 500 years of history, which is, what more can you say? Just sit there and see for yourselves. Can't be described. Once you think about, now how many people do you think would want to come down and see this? If the park's just open and you're just getting out, imagine as a New Yorker, like imagine you all are, is that how you get on the board? I don't know. I use parks all my life. Just imagine 10 years from today, how many New Yorkers are going to want to come down there and see this, especially at night. It's the only park open at night in the city. All right, so I'll give you a hint, millions. But maybe you'll agree with me. Now, how are they going to get in? Well, first look at Fulton Street. It's jammed with commercial stuff. I mean, it looks like Coney Island. Does this seem attractive to you? It does. Maybe it does. Now go to Atlantic, a commercial intersection, 200 years in the making. To put a fine point on Zoltan's, there are 12 different roads intersecting. Add it all up, think about it, and try to change your minds.
Martin Hale. Martin, will you speak as an individual?
For Savior 6, thank you. Hello, I'm Martin Hale. Thank you for your time and attention, everyone on the board. I speak today representing about 4,400 signers to a petition to stop the development on Pier 6 and maximize green space, in addition to about 3,000 people on social media. I have two primary points. One, that the modified GPP should not be accepted. Please vote no. I don't know if that's likely, but I'm going to encourage it. Two, contrary to the assertions of the technical memo, we really do need surprise SEIS. And so on point number one, everyone should be aware of the lawsuit that was filed in 2006, whereby in a court of law, the judge's ruling noted that the GPP represents the maximum build-out within the project, and if market conditions allow for less development to support the park's needs, the development would be reduced accordingly. Well, affordable housing is laudatory. The fact is that it is not revenue generating, and it does indicate conclusively that less housing could be built. If less housing can be built, we believe that the Park Corporation should honor its prior public commitment. If you don't honor your prior public commitments, how can the public have faith in its government? Two, on the SEIS, I won't recapitulate all the other points that have been raised, other than to note that the whole EIS was, of course, built on a very narrow area of interest, assuming it would be a local park. And I actually do think it's wonderful that this is a park for all of Brooklyn. It is truly a wonderful accomplishment for the city to have this park, to go to the park and to see all walks of life. It is a great, great pleasure and privilege. I just ask that this board consider 100-year life in Brooklyn development growing and growing and growing, and keep as much park space from development as possible. In conclusion, I'm not going to use my whole time. We all know about the scandal in Albany, and many of you come from the state side, and it does cast a pall over our elected officials being in the pockets of developers. It's clear money is important in politics, and it's clear that developers wield a very large influence. What better cherry on top of the influence problem sundae than selling off public parkland for development, especially given the documented prior commitments by our elected officials to build the minimum amount of housing necessary. We're not a small group of NIMBYs, despite the press. We're just a broad coalition of people from unionized labor, PS8 parents, union people, local people, and people who simply believe that a government of the people should honor the documented promises to the people. So with that in mind, I urge you to reject the modified GPP today and to require an SEIS. Thank you.
Chris Martin on behalf of Dumbo Bid.
I'm Chris Martin. I'm speaking on behalf of the Dumbo Improvement District. I'm here to speak in support of the project today. We're the Business Improvement District. We represent the property owners, the commercial tenants, the retail tenants in the neighborhood. We also have been providing advocacy, street beautification, neighborhood marketing, and programming of public spaces in the Dumbo area since 2006. It seems almost redundant to comment on the spectacular successes of Brooklyn Bridge Park and how interwoven its success has been for our neighborhood in Dumbo. Almost, but this park came from a derelict, inaccessible, and ignored waterfront to and changed to the thriving open space that we see today. This amazing transformation is a major public work for the entire city. The Dumbo Bid not only works with local businesses, but with area residents and many surrounding community groups. Excuse me. I speak today for all of these constituents who love the park and will benefit from its ongoing success. The Pier 6 project is not only essential for the future of the park, but will provide affordable housing and public amenities for our community. This project and the changes you are considering today are absolutely in our community's best interest and has our full support. Thank you.
Douglas Einstein.
Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Eisenstein. I'm here on behalf of I am president of the One Brooklyn Bridge Park condominium, and I'm here speaking on their behalf. I'm also a member of the CAC. As many here have already said, the general park plan set forth specifically that only so much housing should be built as is necessary to support the park's annual maintenance and operations. These are not just words. These words created a public trust, a public contract. To eliminate this requirement, which the modifications of the general park plan would do, would be a breach of the public trust and the contract that has been had with the community. To permit the proposed amendment of the general park plan without the park meeting the financial transparency requests of the CAC, the public, and numerous elected officials would be a travesty. Justice Louis Brandeis said, "Sunshine is the best disinfectant." Let's have sunshine here, and let's have financial transparency with regard to the need for these buildings to meet the ongoing financial obligations, the annual maintenance and operations of the park. Before any amendment of the general park plan is passed, the park should make available the documents requested in the CAC resolution that the park board failed to even consider. It should be noted that nothing that the park has published to date is close to sufficient to meeting the transparency requirements and requests of the public, the CAC, and the elected officials. Indeed, the huge increase in real estate values for the prior park projects, including One Brooklyn Bridge Park, Pier House, 1 John Street, the original budget was for approximately $750 a square foot. We are now approaching $2,000 a square foot. It is hard pressed to imagine how the park is not fully funded with all the additional revenues that have now been found due to the increase in real estate values, increase in commercial values. This park has the money. If it is shown that it doesn't, and the park's numbers are correct after public scrutiny, then we must look for alternatives to losing public park space for good. Once these buildings are constructed, we can't get the space back. But we can, if there is a shortfall, a brief shortfall in revenue, then we should look at debt financing to fill that gap in the short term, rather than deprive the public of park space in perpetuity, permanently. I also want to make a quick comment about one specific aspect of the proposed modifications, and that's the potential closure of the secondary loop road. At the same time that traffic is being curtailed through Central Park and Prospect Park, this modification would cause a huge increase in vehicles transiting through the park itself. The Brooklyn Bridge Park pilot program for the Pier 5 and Pier 6 uplands has not even been implemented, and therefore there has been no fair opportunity to assess the impacts of not even the closure of the loop road that is now being proposed, but the limited modifications that are being implemented in the pilot program. While the proposed modification in this respect speaks to it being at the discretion of Brooklyn Bridge Park, it puts the cart before the horse. It prevents, if that authority is granted to the park now, it will prevent the opportunity of the public to be able to comment on the pilot program that is being implemented this summer, and with respect to the closure of the loop road specifically. I implore this body to uphold the public trust and deny the modifications of the general park plan until the park has justified the needs for the development in the public view, and until the impact of the community has been fully assessed through a supplemental EIS. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you.
Michael White. Michael, can you clarify if you're speaking for organization or individual?
I'm speaking for citizens defending libraries. Michael White. Thank you. At the last Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation meeting, I held up the controller's letter asking for greater transparency from that organization. And I noted an overlap between the Brooklyn Bridge Corporation members and operatives and the board of the Brooklyn Public Library. After I spoke, after the meeting was over, I had a talk with Mr. Gutman, and he said, "What the heck does this have to do with libraries?" And I think I was being pretty clear that I was talking about public assets and the importance of transparency in protecting our public assets. The conversation went on. He told me that it's not his responsibility, but the lawyers in that regard. Now, he was talking, albeit about the FOIL law specifically, while I was talking about the principles of general transparency and why things should, as a matter of transparency, and those principles be provided. But to say it's a matter for the lawyers sounds like it's really a question of what you can get away with legally. And I think we need transparency because it's important in striking a balance between what the public needs and what the developers are asking for, what the public infrastructure that we need, the public assets that we need to protect. And the public infrastructure we're talking about things like schools. And we heard Senator Squadron's representative here talk about the perpetuation of an imbalance and that being a problem here. The EIS, an updated EIS, is an updated EIS. That's the document that gives you the transparency you need to see how that balance is being struck. And without an updated EIS, you don't have it. And to quote someone else who spoke a little earlier, put the public's interest first. Put the public's interest first. Let's see where we need to strike the balance. Let's see where the public infrastructure matters. And yeah, that's schools. And it has to do with libraries too. Thank you.
Have a Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. Bethany, can you clarify your full name, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Bethany Boyer, representing the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership today. And on behalf of the partnership, I'd like to voice our strong support for the adoption of the proposed modifications that are presented before you. I'm aware that this is the beginning of a lengthy process during which the partnership will have many opportunities to show our support for Brooklyn Bridge Park and Pier 6, so I'll be very brief. As most of you may be aware, Downtown Brooklyn Partnership is a non-for-profit local development corporation that serves as the primary champion for Downtown Brooklyn as a business, cultural, educational, residential, and retail destination. The partnership's diverse activities include attracting new businesses and improving the environment for existing companies, facilitating the construction of public spaces and streetscapes that promote an active and cohesive community, supporting and promoting Downtown Brooklyn's cultural assets, and encouraging a unified sense of place and an engaged civic community. Brooklyn Bridge Park is a key component of this work, and its importance in boosting not only the economy of downtown Brooklyn, but its community cannot be overstated. A big part of the work that we do to connect our community to the amenities and services available to them. Significant affordable housing opportunities have arisen as part of the residential development in downtown Brooklyn. I'm working with Borough President Eric Adams, Assemblyman Walter Mosley, Council Member Lori Cumbo, and a handful of different housing advocates. We're conducting seminars for area residents to understand this application process. Our first seminar, which was held almost a year ago on July 31st, attracted more than 1,000 neighborhood residents. Since then, we've held 3 more seminars, and we've now touched nearly 3,500 people. These numbers speak alone about the need that we have here for affordable housing. And that the Pier 6 project guarantees the future of Brooklyn Bridge Park and will provide desperately needed affordable housing. The partnership wholeheartedly supports this project, and the GPP modification you're contemplating today. Thank you for your time.
It's a D, but I can't read the rest.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us here. I'm Jen Donaker. I'm speaking as a resident of Brooklyn Heights. I didn't know it was coming today, so I don't have anything prepared. But I just want to say, I want to reiterate everything everyone else is saying, or I'll incorporate that so I don't have to repeat myself. But what I really want to focus on is that, I think I am one of the, the newer generation who's moved into this area, right? We wanted to be here because we see that the community and the elected officials and everyone involved has, historically has had a great, I would say, conversations and respect for each other and took each other's thoughts, very thoughtfully to build what I currently think is really an amazing park. I don't have any gripes with what has been built to date, and I think it's beautiful and it's a legacy. But what I think, unfortunately, at some point there's been a tide turn here where things have changed 10 years later. Again, I think I'm representative of what that change means and what's to come. And I think that this new process through the settlement, through the Pier 6 team over here, really meant to open this up again and to provide a good faith effort here between the community and you guys. And I think this is part of your responsibility and your trust. And unfortunately, I just want to impress to you guys that there is a huge feeling amongst the community that this is just a rubber stamp. We're just going through the motions. Nobody here wants to waste their time. I don't think you do, and we don't. So I just really impress on you guys to really think about and listen to what is being expressed to you guys, because there's a real human element going on right here. These are people who cannot get their kids into school, and this is why they came here. There are people who send their kids to go play basketball, and then there are shootings. I mean, there's serious issues occurring, whether it's danger, it's health. So just please try to humanize this. The park is amazing. I don't want it to too quickly get left and destroyed. So whatever you can do, just buy a little time, and please consider having a supplemental environmental impact statement. That's it. So thank you.
Judy Stanton from Brooklyn Heights Association.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Stanton, speaking for the Brooklyn Heights Association. I'm the executive director, and I think I got 4 minutes. We respectfully request that you refrain from taking any action on the BBPC management proposal to recommend a modification of the GPP. We do not believe that you have sufficient information now to act on this recommendation responsibly. We call upon you to independently assess whether the 2 towers conform to the decade-long commitment to build only the amount of housing absolutely necessary to support this park before acting on the modification today. Later public hearings cannot replace your obligation to carefully conduct that inquiry before acting. The essential starting point in this process should be the commitments made in 2005 by this board. The final environmental impact statement for this project states in numerous places that the proposed housing was a maximum the park needs would be assessed as the project proceeded, and the housing would be reduced where possible. This board repeated that commitment to Justice Nykel in the Brooklyn Bridge Legal Defense Fund case, where he wrote, quote, "Respondents also noted that the GPP represents the maximum build-out within the project, and if market conditions allow for less development to support the park's needs, the development would be reduced accordingly," unquote. Today, you're being asked to disregard your commitment. The proposed modification asks you to approve language that permits BBPC to disregard project finances completely. You would be empowering the BBPC to build those 2 huge towers, even if not 1 cent is needed by or used to support the park. The fact that BBPC management is asking you for this power should alone stop this process in its tracks. The materials that have been provided to you have 2 significant omissions. They do not inform that you are violating commitments made in the FEIS and to a Supreme Court justice, nor do they give you any explanation as to why the proposed modification makes sense and should be adopted. It is therefore difficult to understand the basis on which you can make any decision today. We also know that you have been presented with a technical memorandum which is seriously flawed. It completely fails to address alternatives which have become viable since 2005 because of changed economic realities, and fails to address overcrowding in PS8, which is now operating at 140% capacity. So we urge you to take the following steps before considering any modification of the GPP. First, please obtain and review the report of the independent economist that the BBPC has stated it is hired to review its financial plan. 2, please explore the assumptions made in the new financial plan as to how much revenue will actually be generated from the Empire Stores development and the Pier House, both from pilots and profit-sharing commitments, given the significant rise in real estate values in recent years. 3, please explore the sequencing of capital expenditures. Management is proposing a dramatic change in its capital expenditure plan, accelerating $90 million of capital expense into 2016. 4, please consider whether borrowing is the better solution to any temporary cash shortfalls instead of taking parkland from the public forever. If, after conducting such a reasoned financial analysis, you find that the project proposed by the BBPC will generate excess revenue, you should reduce the size of these 2 out-of-context towers or eliminate them completely. There are those who would like to label anyone who opposes housing on Pier 6 as NIMBY, since none of that housing might be affordable. I want to be clear. BHA's opposition to the towers on Pier 6 is not based on the affordable housing component. BHA has been on record opposing any unnecessary housing on Pier 6 as long ago as 2005. The park is not in dire financial straits until the recent decision to spend $90 million in 2016 instead of over 40 years. The BDPC had stated it would not require any income from Pier 6 housing for 10 to 15 years. The park has a substantial surplus and the ability to defer capital expenditures and wait for some of the real revenue data to materialize. Thank you.
Deborah Flynn.
Hello, my name is Deborah Flynn. I'm a Brooklyn Heights resident within the PS8 school zone. I'm here to urge you, before you vote to amend the GPP, to commission a supplemental EIS. All heard significant environmental impacts that will be created by any changes you make to the GPP, and that coupled with all of the changes since 2005 EIS really warrants a new supplemental EIS. And the study area should also now include the Lich site as well as the Watchtower properties down in Dumbo that are now being developed. I think there's a resiliency issue. If we look at resiliency as maximizing the ability to recover from catastrophic events, a supplemental EIS must be done because the proposed new development creates a susceptible built environment with no regard for resiliency for residents, both existing residents who are here today and future residents, such as evacuation procedures and access to critical services. Planning decisions lead to vulnerabilities to hazards. These hazards are what cause disasters that affect people and infrastructure. The existing GPP creates a very vulnerable set of circumstances. Please vote to restudy this potential development in a comprehensive manner and come up with a plan that ensures public safety, adequate provision of city services for all of us, schools, parkland, transportation included. Thanks.
Alex Sack.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Ash. I'm a Brooklyn Heights resident. I'm third generation Brooklyn born. I'm completely opposed to the building on Pier 6. I want to put a personal face on this. Everyone's come up with some great facts. And I just want to share a couple of key points. Last August, I was in an automobile accident not a mile from my home. I went to the nearest hospital. It was 45 minutes away in Sunset Park. If this was a dire emergency, I probably would have died in the ambulance. Number one, so there's no hospital for us. They now just reopened Lich, so we have emergency room, but there's not a primary care hospital. Number two, I have a daughter at PS8. I know we've heard from Todd and others about PS8. Next year, going into first grade, they're talking about 6 first grade classes with 35 people, 35 kids per class. I think that's completely unbelievable for one teacher. No one in our building who was zoned for PS8 for the last several years is going to PS8 next year. So there's in terms of building a community, it just is starting to fall apart already. Thirdly, I just want to say that anyone that has a vote in this, you should come down to where we live on a Saturday or Sunday and think, do you want to live in this community? The crowds are out of control. The garbage that's left in their wake is unacceptable. There's security issues. There's very little police presence in the park because they just don't have the infrastructure. There is Parks Department in the park, but it's really kept at a minimal. As you know, we had a shooting in Pier 2 not long ago. I mean, at what point is something going to have to happen catastrophically for you guys to really think this through? So I urge you to please reconsider. Thank you.
Jeffrey Smith.
My name is Jeffrey Smith. I live in Brooklyn Heights. We've heard a lot of facts here. We've heard a lot of minutiae and excellent facts. But I'm asking you to join me and just focus on a few facts here. What is happening with this building plan? Number one, no new cops. Not one. Not one new fireman. Not one new EMS. These people are the membrane between us and death, and you're thinning it by, if you increase the use of an area, first, there has to be better facilities. You're not getting that. Secondly, there is a stench of corruption which has caused me and my friends in Brooklyn Heights to have resentment, disappointment, and the degree of anger in Brooklyn Heights over this is amazing. If you were holding this meeting at night anywhere near Brooklyn Heights, do you have any idea what would be in this room? The atmosphere? I know what it would be. The Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation operates like the Federal Reserve. It's like trying to find out the Federal Reserve's gold swap program. It's like trying to find out what happened in the Bilderberg meeting. Listen, several of my friends are on their way back from Bilderberg now, trying to find out what they're doing. This is a closed, secret society they're running. I'm asking you to wipe the arrogant, condescending smirks off the face of Brooklyn Bridge Park officials and make them disclose what in God's name is really happening here. Otherwise, I'm asking you to consider the behavior of government in this matter. Are you going to suborn this secrecy? That's not what America's about. It's an open society. What in God's name are you doing here? Not one cop, not one fireman, not one EMS, and they want to plow ahead. These are simple facts. Let's go forward in an open atmosphere. Not, you know, this is like talking to them is like talking to Lucis Trust. You know, it's a secret society. That's what they're operating as, and they're arrogantly going forward. I see them passing notes to several of you around here. I see them whispering in your ears. What do you think that's going to mean when I get back to Brooklyn Heights? I told my friends I saw that. That's what I'm asking you to consider. Thank you very much.
Final speaker is Jennifer Smith.
Good afternoon, my name is Jennifer Smith. I'm not affiliated with anybody. I've been living in Brooklyn Heights since 2004. I think it's a no-brainer, actually, that if you want to make good decisions for the park in 2015, that you need accurate data that's relevant to 2015's problems. I'm here to offer whatever observations I have. 10 years ago, the conversation around setting up the park and housing in the park was about, was it good because you needed eyes in the park because it might be this derelict, abandoned, dangerous space? You know, was it bad because it might be a neighborhood enclave of only the immediate neighbors using it, only rich white people? Those are not today's problems. Reading the EIS and the debates of the day is like an interesting time capsule. Today's problems are about the incredible success of the park. The usage of it, it's overflowing, it's teeming with people of all walks of life, of all socioeconomic groups. I take my daughter down to the playground on Pier 5. I've never once been there when it wasn't majority minority. She has on occasion been the only white child in the park. I know people in that section, that little playground. I know that people are coming from away because of the traffic problems. 10 years ago, when I took the bus down Atlantic, the bus driver pulled over and said, "Miss, you missed your stop. You don't want to go down there. There's nothing there and it's not safe." Now my 81-year-old father-in-law won't walk down Joralemon because it's not safe for him. The sidewalk is overflowing and he has to step into the street. I see people in the morning on the picnic island staking out a spot hours in advance. I speak to people in the lineup to the garage who are waiting for 35 minutes while minivans of delighted, laughing children spill out into the park. The need of low-income and middle-income people from all over the region to use this park is immense. And I would just suggest you might need a supplemental EIS to balance today's issues of the need for maximizing all the parkland versus development. And any decision you make has to primarily be for the benefit of all those thousands of low-income and middle-income people who seem desperately to need this park.
Thank you all. Seeing that there are no other comments, I will entertain a motion for approval. approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Richard, will you continue with the final agenda?
Chairman, the final item today is the adoption of procurement guidelines. The directors are requested to adopt the 2015 guidelines for use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts effective as of today's date. Due to a change in law and regulations over the past year, ESD staff prepared and revised procurement guidelines for adoption by ESD and its subsidiaries. A summary of the proposed guidelines was included in the materials to the board members. The proposed guidelines set forth policies and procedures to be followed by ESD and its subsidiaries when seeking to contract for goods and services. Each subsidiary must approve for itself the guidelines. These guidelines are intended to, as a statement of best practices and procedures. The proposed guidelines explain the various means of obtaining goods and services in an open, accountable, and transparent manner, including incorporation of ESD's bid opening guidelines and compilation of a procurement record for every covered procurement contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions or comments from the directors? Any comments from the public? If not, I will entertain a motion for, oh, this is good.
Judy Francis here. Obviously, this is an orchestrated thing, but I just want to say one thing. Before you vote, there are two other members that this body, this public, knows own property in this park and should not be voting. Okay, there is a conflict of interest there. You expose yourself. Thank you, Steve. You bought your property. You bought your property before you were put on the board, so you should actually be able to vote. But there are others here sitting at this table, your table, voting, who actually own property in this park, in this housing, and I would ask you to challenge them not to vote. That is another violation of the public trust. I'm sorry, Steve, but it is. Okay? I'm just saying.
To be clear, I live adjacent to development property, which was the basis of my decision to recuse myself. With that said, and I will say something now, we're at the beginning of what I think will be a very long and hopefully very open process, where people will have an opportunity to speak. There is going to be a public meeting. There's going to be an opportunity for comment. There will be not only meetings by this entity, but by ESD, and ultimately, if the modification were to pass, by the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation itself. I am impressed, I am proud, I live in the neighborhood, and I am appreciative of the fact that up until the last 2 minutes or 3 minutes, this meeting has been conducted with a degree of thoughtfulness and consideration that is warranted, and that creates an environment in which people actually listen and consider what is being told to them. And I am hopeful, and I believe it is possible that going forward, that will be how we conduct these meetings. Now, with that said, I believe there's a motion with respect to Richard's last proposal on the agenda item. Does somebody move? Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your input. I suspect we will be talking a lot in the future, and I look forward to seeing you at the next series of meetings. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned.